Water should be a human right. We shouldn't be paying for water. They're the biggest enemy of any meter reader because if you kill it and you smush it, he releases pheromones, so the other yellow jackets go into attack mode. So you cannot kill a yellow jacket. When rich people get cut off, they panic. When poor people get shut off, they plan it. She coached her little 2-year-old to yell at me, "You're an asshole," as I walked away.
All right, hey Steve Barnes, welcome to Tales from the Shift. How you doing today, man?
I am great. Thank you very much for having me, Shane.
So why don't we just
Mhm.
start into real basic, short? What is it that a water tech does?
Sure. Well, you're given a company vehicle, so you get to drive a company vehicle around, which is nice. And generally, you're assigned a neighborhood or a town, possibly a suburb or a community, in which to go out and gather all the meter reads so that you can bill the customers exactly what they used. And the whole name of the game is to read them all, to get 100% and to not estimate anybody's or not skip anyone's, because that always causes problems. And then along with those reads, if somebody doesn't pay their bill in X amount of time, it's also a utility tech's job to go and turn their water off. And once they pay, to go back and turn it back on.
Okay. All right. And so how did you get involved with this work?
But just slim chance. I slept my way through high school, barely graduated, went to community college and took classes like communications and creative writing and things like that. And even those classes I lost interest in. So I found myself in the food and restaurant industry and worked my way up in that, which is, of course, it's a job anybody can get in a restaurant or as a cook or as a dishwasher, which I've done all three. But then I became a bartender at night. Being a nighttime bartender on the weekends is very lucrative. But then I also had a small child as well. And so circumstances made me have to get a day job. So I transitioned to being a daytime bartender, which is not a fun job. It's not lucrative, it's not enjoyable, and it's just a lot of dead time. So my brother-in-law, who worked for a utility company, a private utility company, uh, offered me like an entry level job as a meter reader, making slightly above minimum wage at the time. And it was like pretty much the only shot that I had to get a daytime job where I could be by myself. Cause that's another thing I wanted to do, was get away from all the chit chat around the restaurant and the bar world. So working alone was ideal.
Interesting. So at least on the initial level of doing meter reading, if you feel maybe you're a little introverted and you just want to be alone, it might be
Hmm.
a good move for somebody. Be alone in your
Absolutely. Yes. 100%.
nice.
Yes.
Nice, nice. How many years have you been in this business?
I started in 2000. So it's going on 26 years now.
Yeah, yeah. And so we'll get into it, but apparently there's multi levels of this job that you can move
Yes.
through and different things that keeps it interesting. So we'll try and cover all of them. The meter reading, obviously. If someone was on day one and they started, what would be something that might make someone just quit day one? They're like, I'm gonna
Sure.
bounce.
The physical demands. I mean, you got to bend over and stoop down, get on your knees, get up and down a lot. You have to stay focused all day long. And I think somebody who might have, I don't know, be excessively out of shape or maybe have physical limitations, it might not hold for them. Like my uncle was going to he needed a job at one point. So he rode around with me for one day to see if it might be a good fit for him. And like after 10 minutes, he was like, "I cannot do all this bending over. I'm too old for this. So
Really
this is not the job for me."
interesting. Okay, and I don't know if you want to reveal where you're at, but bugs, animals, any of that play into it at all?
Yes, I will reveal. I don't mind telling people that I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I don't necessarily work in Richmond. We cover the whole state of Virginia. So we're going like from the mountains to the ocean, everywhere in between. So yes, you're going to run into commonly black widow spiders because a meter box is like a nice place for them to take up shop. Black widows are also solitary animals that they don't like to have other pals around. So, like, there's usually one black widow per meter box. They like to live in there because there's plenty of food in there for them to eat. Flies, worms, any kind of like crickets, stink bugs, all kinds of bugs like to live in these boxes too, as well as snakes. Snakes like it because in the summertime, when it's really hot, they can get into a meter box and wrap themselves around the water meter itself, which is really cool because it's like the temperature of the water. So snakes really like being in there too.
What kind of snakes are we talking in this thing? Just
Almost always black snakes or garter snakes. I mean, I have definitely seen, copperheads and poisonous snakes, but
wow.
and I've been bit by black snakes before, but never been bit by a poisonous snake or never had a close call with a poisonous snake. I'm lucky because in some other areas, because we're nationwide as well, but I just work in Virginia. Other regions they have things like scorpions in their boxes, which
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with that here in Virginia.
Yeah. Oh, thank goodness on that, man.
Sure.
What about dangerous mistakes? Not necessarily yourself, but maybe you've seen other people make or expensive mistakes other people have made in your work with. Anything?
Yeah, absolutely. At a utility company, it's not just meter readers. There's also going to be wastewater operators, maintenance techs, for well, lack of a better term, ditch diggers, people who are digging in the ground all day. So there's a variety of different vehicles that you can drive. We have these big CXTs, is what we call them, a commercial extreme truck, which is just like a gigantic diesel truck that's pretty common if you're on the highway. And there was an employee that was a CDL instructor, and he had another guy with him, a younger guy that he was training, and they were on a job that was like about an hour and a half away. The younger guy was driving. The older guy, who's the instructor, was sleeping in the passenger seat while the younger guy was driving in the lowest gear possible for about 50 miles and completely destroyed the diesel engine in that truck by driving. When he drove into the shop, we could all hear him coming from so far away. Just the grind of like that low gear, the high pitched whine. No clue how they didn't realize this on the drive, but that truck was destroyed about like $300,000 right there,
So he's just redlining this thing all the way,
all the
and
way.
the other guy slept through that.
A very deep sleeper, obviously. Like all of us were scratching our heads, like how this happened, like how this could be. And the guy who was driving was like, I just thought that's how the truck sounded. I don't know. So obviously, it was the instructor who got in the most trouble. But yeah, they were both written up for that. That's like the biggest destruction I've seen. Another fun destruction thing that happened is we're going to talk about people who get shut off for not paying their bill. And generally in these neighborhoods, it's a lot of rural neighborhoods of about 200 homes, and they have like two or three well sites. One guy got mad that his water got shut off for his bill. So he went to that well site, went inside, and just went crazy with like a sledgehammer and just destroyed everything he could get his sights on. So, of course, the water for that whole community was shut down thanks to this guy's like recklessness. But that was just a purely angry psycho individual that just decided to destroy property.
I I definitely have heard things about maybe a domestic terrorism or maybe even not necessarily domestic, where water supplies could theoretically
Yes.
get messed with. So would you it sounds like it might be as vulnerable as you just described. I mean, what are your thoughts on
Mhm.
that stuff?
Yeah, well, this situation that I'm talking about was one of like my first experiences at this job. This was pre 9/11. Once 9/11 came about, security really tightened up because that's when we realized how vulnerable our wells were. And this one guy destroying this one well was like an eye opening experience. Coupled that with the terrorist threat, and everybody in America was worried about the terrorist threat no matter where you were because it seemed like everybody was vulnerable. So at that time is when we started locking up our wells and tightening up our security measures because that was the paranoia around 2001.
Even with it locked up, I mean, I'm wondering if someone really wanted to do damage to the water system. I mean, would it be pretty easy? I mean, you know how to get through a locked door. I mean,
Yeah, getting through a locked door is not hard, but now in 2026, we're a lot better off. with surveillance than we were back in 2001. Now we have what's called SCADA systems, so everything is hooked up to electronics. Because it used to be if you had a problem at a well site, you had to go there physically and check all the dials and check everything. And now with SCADA, our operators can just log into their computer and see what's happening at a well site. And so something like that happening would trigger an alarm within, seconds. And then it would just be up to the human element to respond to that, which hopefully a human would immediately notice that and then immediately, send somebody out to check it. Because emergencies we take seriously. Some things in the water industry are more important than others. And the priority is also providing water and providing clean, safe water. So those are the biggest priorities. Other things like, leaks or I don't know, minor incidences come in second place to those two things, providing clean, safe water.
Oh, it makes me feel a little better about it. Okay. What about
And plus, I should mention too, like that it's at the benefit of the water company itself to provide clean, safe water. Because the last thing you want is like public outcry saying that you're not providing what you're supposed to be providing. So it's good business sense to like always stay on the upside of things and to squash anything that might come through that looks, you know, bad to the public.
throughout your career, have you gotten any scars, tattoos, any type of injuries from this?
The biggest scar I can think of, you can't even see. It's right here across my eyelid where I did a slip and fall and with my hands full and I bashed my head right here and I bashed it clean enough where it didn't bleed. It just split my skin open right at my eyebrow here. So I went, the first thing I did is I went to Patient First, which I don't know if Patient First is nationwide or not. It's here in Richmond.
So, like urgent care center? Is that what? Okay.
Exactly. Yes, an urgent care center, and they
Mhm.
turned me away because they said they can't do facial scars over an eyebrow because of the precision that has to be done with that stitching.
All right.
So urgent care turned me away and sent me to like a real hospital for that one. Other than that, like, yeah, I mean, you would think I would have really scarred up hands and scarred up knees from the job, but I really don't. I come from a skateboarder background. So most of my scars are from skateboarding as opposed to water utility scars, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. All right. How about a typical? What's a typical day, like start to finish? You're a meter reader. What do you
Sure.
do? Where do you show up? What time you come in? We talking 9 to 5? I mean, what? How does all that work?
Absolutely 9 to 5. You want to start in the day as soon as possible, especially in the summertime. It's actually ideal to start before the sun comes up so you don't spend like the hottest part of the day out there doing your job. So you want to start as early as possible. We at our company we have take home vehicles, so our day starts at our doorstep because we can get all our stuff electronically. But if you're dealing with manual meters and you have to download the program into like an external unit, then you would have to go into the shop. The first thing you do is go into your shop and get your route for the day. Then you basically have all day to do your route. It's a predetermined routes. And actually, when I started at the company, I had a hand in doing that. Is like the whittling down your days into an actual day that won't force the employee to have overtime. And it also won't force the employee to have a lot of downtime. And at the same time, it also offers the employee, like if there's something crazy that happens throughout the day, it kind of gives you a buffer of time. So we're talking like if you have to drive 2 hours to go somewhere, you'll generally have like 2 hours to drive there, 3 hours to do the job, and then 2 hours to drive back home with 1 hour of kind of like float time. So depending on how far away you're working is how big your workload is going to be. Some places I would be local and I would go and read like 500 meters like manually in one day, which is a pretty tough day, but I would still be done, 2:30, 3 o'clock to have that float time at the end of the day. You're basically going as fast as possible from house to house because you're going to have to read every single meter, every single house. And at my company where I've been, we have about 35,000 customers. And the meter readers are really the only people that have been to each and every single one of our customers' homes. Like our water operators who operate at the well and they stay at the well, they don't have to go to all the customers' homes because there's no reason for them to. So a meter reader has a unique opportunity to see every single home, every single customer that we service.
So you go up to a house. Why don't you tell us how do you read the meter? What are we looking at here?
Sure, yeah. And again, like just like areas that varies. Some homes the meter is in the house. So when we do like a town called Reedville, which is a fishing town, it's like at below sea level. You would go into their basement and you would have monthly access to customers' basements, and that felt very weird. I'm telling you, like just walking into somebody's basement and the dude's there, like working on something. Oh, hey, how you doing? Just reading your water meter today. Okay, very doesn't seem like it seems like out of time or something when you're doing this. So that's like the favorite place for utilities to put the meter is like inside the person's home. It's not very ideal for the workers, but for the meter itself, it will last the longest when it's inside of like a temperature regulated home and it's not getting damaged. That's ideal. However, here in Virginia, most of our meters are going to be in the front yard, usually near the other utilities, because every home has like a utility easement access. That's usually where you find your electric boxes, your phone boxes, and the meter box. Generally, it's in the ground. If you read it monthly, it's easier because you every month you're coming and popping that lid, looking inside, getting the meter read, transferring the data to your external computer, moving on to the next one. But like I said, front yard is usually where they are. I'd say 80% are in the front yard. But then you have the systems like us, we're a private company. So back in the day, we would cut corners. Back in the day, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we would cut corners. So instead of running a water line down, say, Avenue A, and then running a water line down Avenue B, you run one water line between Avenue A and Avenue B straight through their backyards. So that's where you have to go to read the meters. So you don't walk a straight line through people's backyards, of course. You're jumping fences, you're navigating garages or their boats or anything they might have back there. Trash piles is very common, brush piles. So about 20% of the time you're having to go into people's backyards with their dogs, maybe asking permission, more than likely not, because you're trying to get as many done as possible as quickly as possible. So knocking on everybody's door is not always ideal.
You got 35,000 homes that you're going to. Um,
Mhm.
do you start to see a pattern? Like, do you say, "Oh, I remember going to this house, and I remember how
Yeah,
there's a problem getting into this one," or I mean, that's a lot of homes to
definitely.
remember. I can't imagine. But so there's some that it's tough to access other than jumping a fence. I mean,
Sure. Yeah, you do develop a muscle memory. Doing it for so long as I have, sometimes if somebody says an address, I can automatically think of where the meter is just based on the address because I've seen it so many times. Or maybe the customer has an unusual last name and that helps you remember it. More often than not, though, when I pull up my vehicle to that house, I'm always pulling it up to the exact same spot and getting out. So even if the meter is covered or buried and we haven't been to it in years, just that muscle memory of like pulling up to the house at the same spot every time gives you an idea. And now we have the Google Earth car, which drives around, does the Google Street View. And our company got ahead of that. So they started doing that sometime around, they really started doing it a lot around 2005, 2006. And we found out they were doing that. We filled up our trucks with spray paint with blue marking paint and we would mark on the street where the meter was. So then the Google Street View car drove around, took a picture, and so that blue mark is now forever etched into Google. So that's an easy way when operators call me, as they often do. We've moved on to electronic meters now, so our meters are now not opened every month. They're instead very rarely opened, so they can get covered up or buried really easily. So usually the best way to find it is to go to Google Maps, go into Street View, go back to the old history, and you'll see a blue mark in the road, and that'll tell you where it's at. But the memory though is I've found that like for the really, really hard to get to meters, you remember those easier than a meter that's in somebody's front yard, front and center. So if you know you have to like do this certain zigzag path to get to it and you got to pass this weird tree, you're always going to remember that. So that kind of has an advantage.
Do you think, I mean, are we eventually getting to the point for most municipalities where it's just remotely read?
Absolutely. Larger companies have been doing it. Like we've been doing it since 2008. That's when we started beginning putting in the electronic meters as opposed to the manual ones. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both, but absolutely larger municipalities, larger counties and cities will definitely have these electronic meters because I mean from a corporate level, from like a business level, it makes a lot more sense to have it electronically because you can gather the reads faster. You have less overhead, which is unfortunate for people looking for jobs. But from the corporate point of view, the less people you have doing it, the better. Safety is a big issue because every time you open up a meter box, there's a danger of, a black widow, yellow jackets, or just simply stepping on a meter lid and falling in because that can sometimes happen where people like will twist their ankle. I've done it myself from stepping on like an unsteady lid. So the more you're staying in your car, the safer you are, the less safety situations that could happen for a company, the better their safety score is, the better their insurance rates are. So really electronic is the ideal way to go. But I see the disadvantages to it because we have less employees now and the boxes tend to get buried. Like after 3 or 4 months of a lot of rain or weather, you're not going to be able to see the box anymore. And then once the grass grows next year, it's pretty much gone from sight.
Hey, quick timeout. If you made it this far in the video, then you must like it at least a little bit. If that's the case and you want to see more, then please like and subscribe, and I'll keep bringing you this content. And it helps YouTube figure out that people actually like this, and they'll send people this way, and we'll grow. With your help, I really appreciate that. Thank you. All right, Steve, can you tell us what's the worst day you ever experienced on a job? Maybe the best day or both?
Worst days specifically are the bad weather days because you got to work in all weather no matter what. And the first thing that came to my mind when you said, what is your worst day is we have to drive, like I said, a good distance to each place. And if you have to spend multiple days in a far away place, it's like 3 hours away, you get a hotel room and you stay overnight, you work for multiple days. So I was reading in a place called Wintergreen. It's like a ski resort here in Virginia and it's 2.5 hours away. It involved an overnight stay, multiple days of work, and it was during like a tropical depression, like a monsoon. It was just the heaviest downpour ever. And me with my pride and my stick to itiveness and like don't want to appear weak or whatever. I mean, I reasoned with myself. I was like, the inside of my truck is soaked. I'm soaked. Everything is soaked. So might as well just keep going because I'm already wet. I can't get any wetter. So I spent 2 days just completely just drenched, and the inside of my truck had puddles in it. It was just awful. And I was in this mountain area, which sounds nice, but then when you're dealing with like this rain and just all this water coming down the mountain at you, the rainwater that is, it just makes for an awful day. Icy days where you have to crack the ice off the meter tops to like even get into it. And then the slipping on the ice, which happened to my forehead here. Weather can pretty much bring about your worst days. And besides that, people's dogs, an untrained dog can really ruin your day. And that's a memory that I have that pretty much always sticks with me as I went into a backyard and it had two full grown, but they were puppies, like pit bull puppies, super friendly, like super excited to see me. Like they were just licking me to death and just having such a ball. And so, I just kind of pet them. Hey guys, what's up? And then go back to the meter. While I'm going back to the meter, of course, I'm not paying attention to them, but they're both trying to get my attention. So they start fighting with each other in order to get my attention. And then I'm in the middle of like this pit bull fight while they're around me and they're viciously, I mean, it wasn't playing. They were attacking each other. And I was just, they were huge and I was frightened for my life and just very slowly backed away because I tried to walk away fast and they both like ran at me and like bit at my legs when I ran fast. I was like, okay, I'm going slow. That's the only thing I can do here is just go slow. I made it out of there okay. And in that situation, I learned that dogs like that, when they want to attack, they need to bite something. So I've learned that having something in your hand to offer them to bite is the best thing you can do because otherwise they're going to choose your leg or your shoe or your hand. So if you have something that they can bite onto that they can attack, that will definitely increase your chances of getting away.
So you're just carrying around a squeaky toy or
No, that's the worst thing you can do. One
oh,
of the guys that trained me, we would do that. He would take dog treats with him in his pockets and he would have toys. And that would just be, it would be a time suck, first off, because you find yourself playing with these dogs and the dogs expect the treats. So he worked there before I did. So he would go around and give treats to all the dogs. So now when the dogs see me, they're like, oh, here's a guy who's going to give us a treat. I wasn't carrying treats around. So, like that, it reflected very poorly on me that I didn't have the treats to offer. The other guy did.
so have you gotten bit by a dog or no?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I mean, never like life threatening, but yes, you get your ankles bit probably a half dozen times at least. I
Amazing.
mean, it comes, and one time I got bit by a dog that was on a leash with his owner. I was walking down the street and there was a guy with his dog on a leash, and the dog ran up to me and bit my ankle, and the guy thought that was funny. I did not.
What an asshole. What?
Yeah, that's what I said too. I'm still saying that 10 years later.
Okay, well, let's talk about people then. I mean, obviously dogs can
Mhm.
bite you. What about have you had any issues with anybody getting mad at you over this job?
Absolutely. Probably the first time it happened was when I was very early in doing this, and we're talking backyard meters. And generally, backyard meters are going to be like in lower income areas, which is where I was. And I didn't know where the meter was because I was brand new. So I'm back there dressed like I am now because the company that I worked for at that time didn't have any rules or regulations or safety procedures. It was just kind of like, just wear some old clothes and go out there and read the meters. That's what I did. So I'm just a regular looking dude, long haired dude, like with just my regular clothes on, walking around in people's yards looking for something. They don't know what I'm doing. They have no idea. So on one of my first days, a guy came out with a gun. He wasn't like pointing at me like with his finger on the trigger or anything like that, but he came out with the gun. It was like, excuse me, what are you doing? Like, stern, like right to the point. And I was like, I'm I'm the water meter guy. I just started. And he was totally cool with that. But just let
Uh,
me know he meant business if I wasn't there for the right reason. He was ready to let me know. And he wasn't impolite or anything, but that is very typical of my early days of like not knowing where the meters were exactly, hunting around in the yard. A homeowner sees that. This guy with the gun was very polite because there's other people that have run out like, "What are you doing in my yard?" You get a lot of that, or you get a lot of like, "Leave me alone," or you represent the water company and the water company has wronged me, so I'm going to yell at you about it. So that's doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen every day, but when it happens, it can make you feel terrible.
yeah, for real. So if people think they've been wronged by the water company, what do they feel they've been wronged about? What's a common thing?
Usually they'll get their water cut off. And it's so, to you and I, reasonable people, it kind of makes total sense. Like, you didn't pay your bill. There's a warning on your bill that says if you don't pay it by such time, your water will be cut off. And then that happens. And I guess they just don't realize that there's actual real consequences to that. And so they get very irrational about it. And in that anger, they'll also like come up things like, y'all also charge me way too much for my water. I shouldn't pay for water because water should be a human right. You get all kinds of arguments from people, but the main thing is they didn't pay their bill. And so it's kind of on the customer, or they're mad that their rates are increasing. which I can absolutely sympathize with as a bill payer, I should say, because I pay bills too. So when you see the power company, the water company is going to increase your rates and they do it like every 3 years, you kind of get that perpetual anger for these companies that keep raising your bills while you yourself aren't making any more money, but they're asking for more money from you. So people will take that out on whoever they see in their vicinity.
Yeah. So when you need to cut someone off because they haven't paid the bill, first of all, how long
Yes.
do they get? But and then second of all, how do you do it? What's the process?
Yeah, great. Good questions. The threshold is $100. If their bill reaches the $100 level and higher, that's when they'll get their first warning to say, you have 30 days now to either pay your bill or get on a payment plan. So there's really no time period. It's just a dollar threshold period, which is kind of unfortunate because somebody who might have a leak or somebody who's used a lot of water or more than they expected in 1 month, they could get cut off like within 30 days of that bill, and it could kind of catch them off guard. But the process of actually doing it, of course, you have to open the meter box, and there's going to be a very tough valve inside there. It's maybe like 3 inches long by like a half inch thick, and it's designed to be hard to turn on and off for all kinds of reasons. So you need a special tool in order to do it, which is basically just a large wrench, for lack of a better phrase. So that's all you do is well, I should go for the whole procedure because you don't just show up and do it. So you get a notice that the customer has also gotten a notice. By the time that you are assigned that job, they have already gotten a letter in the mail and a phone call from the billing company letting them know that their water is getting cut off by X date. So you as an employee, I prefer to drive up and park my truck in such a way that if they look out of any window of their house, they can see the logo of my truck because I want them to know that I'm there. In the past, I've worked with guys that like to do like the sneak and run where they park up the street and then like turn it off real quick and then run away. That's the worst way to do it. The best way to do it is to let the person know that you're there. So the reason is a couple reasons. And there's like a little saying that we like around the office when it comes to this. When rich people get cut off, they panic. When poor people get shut off, they plan it. So the rich person will see your car, see the truck. What's that guy doing here? Oh my God, he's turning the water off. He's coming to the door to leave a door tag. I better go out there and commandeer him and, figure out what's up. And usually in that case, it's because like their payment plan with people who are higher income or maybe even average income people, they pay their bills through like electronic means. They have like an automatic payment set up.
Yeah.
But if something happens, that automatic payment set up and the payment doesn't come through, they'll get shut off just like anybody else will. Usually they'll be more surprised about it and they'll act surprised and they'll act accordingly. Like I said, they'll panic. They might come out and yell at you. They might come out and reason with you. They might pull money out and try to pay the bill on the spot. Really, when that happens and they feel like they shouldn't have been cut off and they have the resources to pay it, all it takes is a phone call to the company, make a quick payment, and then your water either won't get shut off or it'll get shut right back on. But the reason I like to pull up and so they can see my logo is so if they're expecting me, then they'll see me there. And usually, when somebody knows their water is going to get cut off on a certain date because they haven't paid the bill and they can't pay the bill, they're not going to come out and yell at you. They're just simply just going to let it. They don't want to be seen by you. They just allow the water to be cut off. That's pretty much the ideal scenario. You always have to leave a door tag on their door to let them know you've been there. So the sneak and run, you can't do that. You're like, I should say morally, you should not do that because part of the procedure is to leave a door tag on the door, letting the person know that you were there. Otherwise, it's considered a sneak and run, and you don't want to do that. So, for a person that can't pay their bill, they'll usually just avoid you altogether. And then when they're gone, they'll come back out and they'll turn their water back on themselves. That's a pretty common thing that happens. And that can become very secular, where like every month it'll kind of happen because you don't realize they turned their water back on until the next billing cycle when you're like, oh, they've used water when they should not have. So we got to tack this fee on there and then charge them even more. So it can, that can build up to thousands of dollars very easily by the fees and like turning themselves back on in that way. Another thing that customers can do if they know you're coming to cut the water off and they don't want you to do it is they'll either block access by parking a car on top of it or dumping a bunch of crap on top of it or filling the meter box up with anything. They'll put dog feces in there. They'll put like food in there, anything to block you. And there's been traps. People have put broken glass in their meter boxes back in the old days just to be, I guess, get back at the company or something. So there's a variety of things people do to avoid getting cut off, but the perfect person will knows they're about to get cut off. They allow it to happen. They call the company and pay their bill back. We come back same day, cut them back on. That's pretty much the perfect scenario.
I I pictured all this shit in these boxes, like, that's amazing. That really blows my mind that people would go through that
Me too.
process.
And these are like the same people that like wave hi to you at the store when you stop in the store. Like when you're in a community, like all the businesses, all the schools, all the people all draw water from the same source. So if you go to the 7-Eleven, you're providing that 7-Eleven with water, and all the customers in there are also customers. So it's like, why would you do that to somebody within your own community? But sure enough, they have. The ones that stick out to my mind are onions, dog feces, fish, and glass. So those are like the worst things you can come across in a meter box. Doesn't happen much anymore. This was more back in between 2000 and 2005, the meter reading heyday before electronic meters came about.
So, at this point, there's no way to shut off someone remotely?
It's very expensive. It is possible. And I think like larger cities do that, larger cities that probably have more dangerous neighborhoods they go to. There are remote access. It's just basically a valve that opens and closes at your whim, like through, I mean, for lack of a better term, it's used through radio frequencies or like a Bluetooth that just activates a mechanism to turn the valve off. Then you can activate the mechanism to turn the valve back on. But we're talking like each one of those valves is like $600 or $700 plus the hardware to even run it is going to cost you hundreds of $1,000s. Whereas if you just buy like a regular valve you can turn on and off, that's $5. So smaller companies, rural areas are not going to have those remote, but in the cities you probably do have the access where you can turn them on and off that way. Even with those though, you still have to be within a certain um frame of, you have to be like within, I think, like 50 feet in order to operate it. So you can't do it like from an office at this point.
Interesting, really cool. Steve, would you say that the job has affected you personally in any way throughout the years?
I got to say, like, some negative experiences I've had with customers have just made me look at other people differently. An example of that would be I went to shut off a person's water, and it was a woman with her kids in there. And it was a situation where I had to shut the water off. It wasn't like a loosey goosey situation, like, oh, I can come back later. Or, if you take care of this by, tomorrow, it'll be fine. It was a repeat situation. So the water had to be cut off and she couldn't pay. And so I was talking to her at her door. Her little kid, maybe like 2 years old, was next to her. She was obviously not happy and she was being really snippy and crappy with me. I mean, kind of as expected. And I was just being professional with her. As I walked away, she coached her little kid to say, "You're an asshole." She coached her little 2-year-old to yell at me, "You're an asshole," as I walked away. And she was giggling. At one point hand, it was, kind of adorable because he's a little kid saying this. But on the other hand, what an awful parent to like
Yeah.
coach your kid to call someone a curse word and then giggle as they say it. And it's like on all hands as a parent. It's a terrible thing to do. And so I kind of took that experience with me. And so when I see someone that reminds me of that woman, I'm like, oh no, their kid's going to call me an asshole.
Well, my thought is if you're the person who does this, then you're the person who is going to get your water cut off. Like to me, those things are going hand in hand, in my opinion.
I see where you're going with that. And a lot of guys I work with will agree with that. It's like, if you're a dick to me, I'm gonna definitely cut your water off.
Well, no, I'm not saying that you're going to do it in a retribution type way. I mean, they're the kind of person who isn't going to pay their bills.
Yes. Okay. In that respect. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. Some communities are primarily rental communities and they're destitute. I mean, you can just tell by driving in the community, they're not able to keep the upkeep of their houses in check. They just don't have all the resources that other people may have. And then that's where you're going to have to inadvertently do a lot of more cutting off of the water. And that's where I say, like, I don't enjoy the retribution aspect to it. I've never ever felt good about cutting somebody's water off. Even that woman who made her kid call me an asshole still didn't enjoy cutting her water. I would much rather her say, yeah, I'm going to call and take care of it now. And then I could walk away happy. Cause yeah, the person in the shoes of doing that, I have worked with guys that almost take pride in doing that and they relish cutting somebody's water off who's a jerk. And I could never see eye to eye with that kind of perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Steve, is there anything enjoyable about the job, like a Benny that you were surprised to learn once you got involved with this type of work?
Yeah. All the alone self time that you have, you can really take advantage of that time. And I definitely did. Now with phones, it's easier. You can look at your phone if you'd like in your spare time, but I have taken like instruments with me to work to practice when I have like off time or I have like a lunch break. Books, definitely, listening to music and being a podcaster. I've definitely spent my road time like you have 2 hours of driving. You can't really do anything, but you can certainly think and you can certainly, with voice to text, jot down notes. So I've planned a lot of podcasts by, spending that time in my vehicle. The job itself teaches you, I think, how to adapt to all types of different environments and what you can expect. So, like, I know where like a snake might be hiding, for example, or I know the signs of like a yellow jacket nest in the ground. Certain things like in nature that and being outdoors that are very advantageous. I've learned what poison ivy looks like on site. That's something you have to learn because a lot of times meter boxes will be in the midst of a bunch of poison ivy. So, like the outdoor skills are definitely key.
Yeah, you mentioned the instrument you play, music instruments. I mean, we see the stuff behind you there. I mean, you have a music group called Intro Void. If you want to talk about that real quick, they're on Spotify. I would play some of the music. You said this whole this whole video might get taken down if we do it, even though it's yours. Go ahead, tell us about it.
Yeah, I would love for you to play my music on here, but yeah, I know even when I try to put my own music on my own podcast, it will still get flagged and taken down. So we don't risk that. We're not Barry Gordy here. We're just Steve Barnes. But yeah, I've been playing music all my life. Well, I started when I was younger than 10 because my grandfather was a organist and a guitarist. And so I picked up those skills from him. Was never trained, but always just kind of learned the same way my granddad did, just learning by ear and just picking up the chords. So I've always been into metal music. So the first bands I were in were like metal and punk bands when I was like 16, 17. Now I'm going to be 54 this year, and the current band I'm in is the exact same guys that were in the very first band I was in when I was 16, which is great because it's like everything has kind of come full circle. We're all adults now, and we all lead adult lives, and it's just really neat to be able to like reconnect with people after that length of time, and then you still fall into the same roles. It's really nice.
Got it. Got it. Got it. All right. Well, hopefully people check it out on the Spotify or or wherever they can get it at.
It's available everywhere, Shane. Everywhere music is found, you can find Introvoid.
All right. Let's talk about your peers. Anything about your coworkers of note? Fun, competitive? You guys, I mean, what's it like working with the other people? I mean, I know you mentioned this is a little bit of a solitary job, at
Mhm.
least initially. What are your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you get the whole group together, you have a group of about 15 introverted guys that haven't been talking to anybody all day. So like you get a lot of stories. You get everybody comparing notes of what your solo day was like. And almost everybody that I work with is an introvert, works best by themselves, but once you get them on the phone, you can't get them off the phone because we just have so much to say because we haven't talked to anybody all day. So it can be really dicey getting into a conversation with a coworker. It can last for hours. Generally, we're all self-starters. None of us, like, are told what we have to do. Like like, for a meter reader, you have, like, a monthly schedule. You're going to the same places once a month, and so there's no variation, and you know exactly what you're gonna be doing. For some of the other operators, they might have, like, a weekly run where they have to go to every well once or twice a week. So nobody is like assigning jobs to anyone else. Everybody is a self starter and starts themselves. And so, with that type of personality, we kind of all start on the same playing field where even though there's a big variance of ages and like religions and politics at our job, because like the youngest person is 18, the oldest person is like 75, and everybody else falls somewhere in between. It just seems like we're all kind of outdoorsy types. We all kind of know how to handle animals and insects in a practical sort of way. And even though I think a majority of my coworkers consider themselves, Republican or conservative, and I am not, I'm the extreme opposite of that. I can't remember any like weird political discussions or like controversial things being talked about, even when extreme things happen, like in the news or in like our political cycle, it usually doesn't come to the office. We have a real like practical sense of like ourselves and what our job is and what we do. And plus, it's kind of an advantage that our job is kind of a necessary job. It's a utility company. So everybody is going to need water. So there is that kind of sense that we're all kind of safe in our jobs where we're not all of a sudden our company is not going to go bankrupt or anything because everybody needs water. And even if our company died, another company would buy it up and operate it the same way, which has happened a couple times. We've gone through a couple situations like that. So I think it comes from my supervisor as well, because I've had the same supervisor this whole time. And he also started as a meter reader, and pretty much all of us have started from the bottom, but he himself having started as a meter reader, and the way he just has this practical, like no nonsense, no lies allowed kind of attitude that trickles down to everyone else. So you don't hear people of my coworkers like making weird excuses to like not come to work or why they didn't do something. It's a very honest and open environment. Like, I forgot is kind of an acceptable answer because it's an honest answer. Or, I broke this thing because I was in a hurry. That's also an acceptable answer. But lies or like weak excuses just are just not tolerated, basically. So there's been times that I've called in sick to work because I've just been depressed. I've told my boss that I can't make it in today. I'm just so down. I just can't. And he's like, okay, take a sick day. See you tomorrow. Honesty is rewarded. So I think in that type of environment, we kind of hire a lot of the same type of people. Most of us are guys. There is, I think, like 4 or 5 women that work in the field as well, but it's a majority guys for the most part. But even so, it's definitely not a sexist type environment. I think I'm very lucky in where I work because I don't think a lot of other people might be saying these same things because they might
Mm.
say there's a lot of sexism racism and like political jokes on the job. And that just doesn't happen where I'm at. So my point of
Yeah.
view is that those are the people I work with, a lot of people that are like me. And um, yeah, there we go.
Cool, cool. All right. What's a question that you wish people would stop asking you about your job? And bonus points if it's one of the questions I've already asked you. That'd be great.
I'd love to have some bonus points, right? That sounds great. Why are they raising my rates? Why is my bill so high? Why does it cost so much for water? I hate answering these questions. It's almost like a non starter because, on one hand, the company gives you these answers for these questions, but they're always these BS corporate answers that don't feel comfortable coming out of my mouth. So I can only sympathize with people when they ask, why are they raising my rates? They already charge me enough as it is. I can only say, yeah, you're right. I agree. So that's like the worst question you can ask. In respect to that, I want to make it clear. I do feel that water should be a human right. Like in my heart of hearts, I do feel that people should have access to free, clean water if they need it. Unfortunately, that's not a reality. But we do, even though we raise rates and we're constantly raising rates for all kinds of different reasons, it's still incredibly cheap. We charge 1 cent per gallon, 1 cent per gallon of water is what we charge. So if you think about that, like a gallon sized jug of water you buy at the store, it's like $2. We're selling it to you for 1 penny. So in that respect, the water is pretty darn cheap.
In the news, I guess there's been a rise in some distraction thefts where criminals pose as utility workers
But
to
yeah.
commit robberies. What do you think about this?
Yes. I mean, yeah, mixed feelings. First off, it's so easy to do. I see there's a guy on TikTok that I see. He's like it's a jokey pranky thing where he puts on a vest, he has a drill in his hand and a ladder in the other, and he goes up to any business and says, "Where's your electric room at?" And they'll take him to like their electric panel and just leave him there. And he'll like just do jokey things like take his shoe and pretend like he's turning knobs with his shoe and stuff. And it's just to show you that all you need is a vest to gain access to anywhere you need to gain access to. So on one hand, it's kind of genius. On the other hand, it's scary. And it makes me want to wear my safety vest at all times. Because as I told you before, if you just go in someone's yard dressed as yourself, they're going to question why you're there. They see a safety vest, they feel a little bit better. But it is scary. That's the only thing I can think of to answer that question is it's scary how easy it is to gain access. And as soon as someone sees me and says, even with my safety vest on, and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm just checking your water meter." They say, "Okay." And they go back in their house. I mean, it's uncomfortable saying this out loud on a microphone because I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. That's how scary it is. It's really easy to be that type of person and to gain access anywhere you need to. And you have a truck, if you have a white truck with a logo on the side, you can get into any gated community. You can get into any business, any government place you want to go to. If you have that white truck with a logo on the side, guaranteed it's a ticket anywhere and nobody's going to question who you are. And that is scary, Shane. It's scary.
All right. Steve, what is the best or worst TV show or movie that depicts your career?
Yeah, there's really only two that I could think of. One's fiction and one's nonfiction. Actually, they're both nonfiction. Oh, geez. There's Aaron Brockovich, which dealt with a power company that was polluting the water that they were operating nearby, and that instigated a lawsuit. And Aaron Brockovich, of course, was the one who like really dug deep into that lawsuit and found the true root cause of that water being poisoned through the electric company, which is like a good example of how our companies work together. You hear about these data centers going in for AI, and those data centers need to be cooled down by a water resource. So these utility companies work together in that way. And I think Aaron Brockovich just kind of represented, the worst that could happen on a corporate level and how that can impact even the smallest customers.
Yeah, I've
And
heard
then
that
there's a document. I'm sorry.
Before we go to that one, I have heard that so the AI data centers, some people are complaining that groundwater is getting poisoned from it. Is this true? Have you noticed anything being affected in your areas?
That is not true. The water is not being poisoned by the data center, but they do need like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gallons of water to cool down their data centers. So that water could, of course, be being used in other communities that don't have water sources. There's plenty out there on the West Coast, and California is a great example because we're trucking in water to California because they don't have as many sources that they used to. So a lot of even our water from Virginia gets trucked over to California for them to use. But now we're diverting water to data centers instead so that we can play with AI on our computers. That it doesn't seem ideal to me. It seems like that water should be used instead for human consumption, not for cooling down a data center. So it's not poisoning the water, but I think it is poisoning our minds. How's that?
Hey, you don't have to convince me. I have yet to see very few compelling arguments as to why we should even keep going with this damn thing. Like everything seems to be a night. Well, we're going to take your jobs and we're going to use up your water. And we're going to make your bills go higher. It's like, okay, great. So I can generate an image of,
Yeah,
Mickey Mouse jumping off a diving board. Like what's in it for me? You know what I mean?
sure. Yeah. And yeah, a great movie to like back up that point too is my second movie I was going to talk about, which is a documentary. It's called Water and Power: A California Heist. And it's basically about how, the state of California, especially the very rural areas of Southern California, they need water trucked into them because their communities don't have the resources to provide their own water. And there's very alarming scenes of people in California who have like a well and they can take a lighter and they can light their water on fire because there is X amount of like petroleum that is leaking into their water system. So the water that they're drinking is flammable. It's awful. And this movie, Water and Power, a California Heist, kind of dives into that, like how we're shipping water to these different areas and how, our resources are running thin, not to the point where we're going to be out of water in the next 20, 30 years, but I mean, we're definitely putting a big dent in it, especially in this past 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely heard about there are places where the farms have basically no rules as far as their water usage, whereas the people, well, you have to pay this much. You can only use it. Hey, wait, don't take showers, relax. Whereas you have farms that are irrigating perhaps crops that don't even grow there very well, except they require a ton of water. And then a lot of the companies aren't even from the United States, and they're taking the product and they're just removing it out of here. Have you
Sure.
heard about this kind of stuff?
Absolutely. There is like a counterpoint to that because if, say, you do have a farm and you drill your own well, you hire somebody to come in, pay five or $6,000, and you drill your own well so you can operate and maintain your own water source. So, of course, there's no regulations around that. You can use as much as you want until it goes dry. And then when it goes dry, you can go to another spot and tap into the water source from there. So that's a reason why like a lot of farms and a lot of people who have wells don't have to worry about the regulations and don't have to worry about the usage because it's kind of up to them, but they have to pay for the upkeep of that water. They have to, if anything goes wrong with their water source, they are the ones that have to fix it. To if it gets contaminated, then the government has to step in and actually shut down that site. But if you're drilling your own well, you can play by your own rules, but you're also on your own. It's kind of like a renegade kind of thing. Whereas if you buy water from a city source, you don't have to we don't have to worry about any labor costs. You don't have to worry about fixing your well or adding chemicals. You just turn on your tap it, it's there. You got to pay for that every month, but it's worry free basically.
So, are you saying, let's say in California, for instance, the farms are all taking from their own personal wells, or they're not necessarily taking it from some other source?
Well, that's different. because I was referring to Virginia farms. In California, like their whole entire aquifer can be contaminated. But like within like a 30-mile area, that entire aquifer has X amount of petroleum in it, so it can't be used. So you nobody can drill a well within that third, or they can drill a well, but it's going to be contaminated water within that certain area in that aquifer. Because all the water is coming from aquifers underground that are self-maintained by nature, but the water has to come out of the ground and has in many cases has to be treated.
What about slang terms? Do you guys have any slang terms that you guys toss around in this in this line of work?
We have what's called a zero consumption customer, and this is like the worst. This is a very bad scenario. It can be for the customer and for us too. Is if you have a meter that's read electronically with a little electronic doodad on it, and the meter is mechanical, but it reports the read to the electronic doodad. So if something goes wrong between that mechanical and electronic device, it it will just send out a static read. Whatever the last read it got from the meter, let's say it was 150, every time the customer gets billed, it's going to be that same read, 150 over and over and over again, looking like they haven't used any water. But then when somebody actually opens that box and looks at the mechanical register, all the water that they use is going to be on the mechanical register. So now it says like 15,000 instead of 150. So they have to pay for all that water they used in arrears during one billing cycle. So if their meter was stuck for like 12 months, then they're paying for 12 months worth of water in one billing cycle. That's bad for everyone. And in my opinion, and what I like to try to do is not back bill the customer for anything because it's a problem on our company's side. It's our company's malfunction, not the customer's malfunction. Therefore, the customer shouldn't be made to pay for our mistake. The flip side of that, the company will say, well, the mechanical register proves that they use this water. Therefore, they need to pay that water. My obvious retort to that is, but you're expecting them to come up with all that money in 1 month. It's not feasible for most people to do so. They're just going to get into that shut off billing cycle where they're always going to be X amount of money over their bill.
Yeah, interesting.
So yeah, zero consumption is kind of a dirty word, and we talk about that a lot because it happens a lot. And then there's thing we call things TOBKs and SONPs. Like a TOBK is when somebody has turned their own water back on when they shouldn't have. Whereas an SONP is where we're shutting them off because they haven't paid their bill. There's a kind of a difference in there.
Steve, how about your hot take? Is there anything you believe about this industry that your coworkers might disagree with?
Absolutely. I'm one of these guys that thinks that I think I've already mentioned it twice here. Water should be a human right. We shouldn't be paying for water. So that is one of my hot takes is that I agree that it's ridiculous to pay for people to be paying for water. It's even more ridiculous to be shutting somebody off because they haven't paid for their water. During the pandemic, we did not shut people's water off, like just straight up between like 2021 and like guess 2023 is when we got back into it again. We just didn't shut people's water off because the implications were too high. Like there could be somebody that couldn't leave their house, or it could be somebody you didn't know the situation if someone had COVID or not. So we just didn't shut anybody's water off. It was wonderful. We were all able to focus on our jobs instead of shutting anybody off. There was no reconnects because sometimes cutting somebody back on after turning them off is worse than turning them off. So, yeah, I think water should be free. I think water should be a human right. And this is the biggest hot take I think I have being a meter reader and working in the meter department, and I analyze the meter data. I think it should all be straight connections. I don't think we should have meters. I think it should just be a well and then just pipes that go into people's houses, and then they can just use however much or however little they need and then pay like one flat rate instead of charging them incrementally for their usage. I kind of think it should just all be flat rate. That way you can eliminate the need to go in and read it every month. You could eliminate the need to, like, when somebody new moves in, somebody old moves out, you have to get the read that exact day. Having flat rate would eliminate that. It would eliminate shutoffs.
How do you feel about wasting though? I mean, how would that if people if you made it unlimited, you don't think there are people that are like, I'm just gonna water my yard with 24/7 until it's a swamp. Like, I mean,
Mhm. Here's another hot take. We waste a lot of water. As a utility company, we flush the lines on a regular basis, whether they need it or not. And when you're flushing a line, you're opening your valves up at high pressures so that all the sediment in the pipes gets dispersed out of the system. So you have to use hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gallons just to clean the thing out. When you first drill a well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to run a few 100,000 gallons out of the well to clear out your initial pipe. That's your initial pump that's down there. We waste an extreme amount of water through flushing and through normal installations. So for us to like bill somebody to the penny because they use 10,000 gallons, it seems ridiculous to me as just the way my mind works.
yeah, interesting. Steve, let's talk about where this job goes. So, meter reading sounds like day one kind of a thing for most of you.
Yes.
Where can you go? What are some of the other roles you could take in this industry? And
Sure. Maintenance would be one, which would be people who install the water meters, install the meter boxes. So that usually is a step up because it's a harder job. Being a water operator, because when you're reading meters, you learn all the areas that the customers are at. Everywhere the customers are at, there's going to be a central location where there's a well, and that well needs to be checked X amount of times a week. You need to add X amount of chlorine to it to clean the water. You might need to run it through filters. So there's always operators who operate those wells. That is also another step up. Then you have the wastewater operators, which is, work at the wastewater plants. And that's probably the biggest step up you can, I mean, outside of management, being a wastewater plant operator is probably the most lucrative job outside of like engineering or management because you're at the plant all day. It's a job that requires a lot of education because you need to know your science. You need to look at things through a microscope. You're dealing with like UV bulbs because basically what you're doing is you're intaking all the rainwater, all the water that gets flushed down the toilet, and everything within it. And you need to squeeze all the gunk out of it into the plant. And then all the water that can be recycled and used goes back into the water stream. That water has to be 100% clear when it leaves the building because this is naughty poo poo water. It has to be 100% clean. So in order to do that, you have to be an experienced person and be able to like read all kinds of settings and the microbe levels. And plus it's a stationary job. You're by yourself, you're at the wastewater plant, you're there all day. The job doesn't take all day, just takes a few hours. It could be a dream job for many people, like just running a whole facility by yourself and you're in charge of it. Um, so that would be a step up. Yeah.
have you worked there?
Not like as my position, but yes, I've operated the wells. I've helped in the wastewater plants. I've helped do some planning, like project planning. We're in the middle of doing that right now. And yeah, I've moved up the ladder some myself too, because I started being the guy who would assign the routes to the meter readers and I would be analyzing the data, checking for high usage, making the schedule for people. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of different avenues you could take. And if you wanted to stay a meter reader forever, there's a guy that works there. He's been working there since 2002. And he hasn't moved up and he's completely happy doing what he's doing. He's still there to this day. He doesn't want to do anything else because he's gotten to this groove. But most people like to move up and become an operator at some point. And yeah, the pay itself is it's better than minimum wage. Like here in Virginia, the minimum wage is 12.77 an hour. That's what they're required to pay. But being a meter reader, we hire people between 16 and $22 an hour to start. So it's above minimum wage, and you always are going to be guaranteed at least a percentage raise every year.
What about either in Virginia or elsewhere? Do you know if there's any place that still gives out pensions for these municipalities or that?
I wish. I don't know. That's a foreign word to me. No, I don't know about that one.
All right, all right. So you guys just do like a 401k then, basically.
Yes.
Toss into that.
Yes.
Okay. All right, cool.
Absolutely.
All right.
And yeah, to get and I was going to say, like, to get this type of job, if I mean, I know it's not as exciting as like a private investigator. I listened to that episode. I loved it that you did with that guy. So this is not quite as exciting, but it might be an easier job to get than being a private investigator. And you're not going to be looking at places like Indeed.com or LinkedIn. If you wanted to get a job as like a meter reader or in a water utility, you go straight to the municipality itself, or you go to the county website or government websites, or you look at a utility company itself and its own job careers page. Because they usually don't, like, we don't post on like Indeed or monster.com.
Okay.
It's pretty much all internal.
All right. So that's the process to get going. So technically, you would say no background would be required, at least to start
Yeah,
with the
that's
meter
right.
reader. Cool, cool. What about drug testing?
Yeah,
They
there's
do that?
always like a preliminary drug test to get in,
Okay.
and but there's no like random drug tests unless you hold a CDL, unless you
Mm,
hold a license, and in which case you do need to take. Well, you don't need to take a drug test, but drug tests can occur randomly if you have a
when it's
CDL.
CDL. Sure, sure, sure.
Otherwise,
Okay.
you just get tested upon hire, and then of course if you have like an accident or something like that. Like when I got my head busted open, I had to take a drug test when I went to the hospital for that. Because, like, if they had found out I was on drugs, then they could just not pay it
Right.
and just make
Oh,
me pay
wow.
it myself.
Would you
Yeah.
say there's maybe a specific personality type that gravitates toward this type of work?
Yeah, definitely the outdoorsman type, outdoors woman's type, to be fair. Somebody that's able to work alone and likes being outside and likes being out and about. It's kind of like a necessity, actually, because if you prefer being stationary and prefer being in an office or prefer being indoors, it's just not gonna be the job for you. So you definitely have to be like okay with being exposed to nature and outdoor elements.
Well, it sounds like what you were saying earlier is maybe you get in, right? So you're doing the meter reading for a while. Maybe you could gravitate into the waste management portion of it. So now
Sure.
maybe now you can be stationary. So maybe there is a place you could find yourself and not have to leave the employer.
Right. I think it almost touches upon like what can be like a real catch 22, whereas like you love your job. And then the only way that you can elevate is to go into management, and maybe you hate management. So you want to stay at the job that you love as opposed to go into management. So I think in the water industry, there's a lot more opportunities like that. Instead of going into management, you can go into a facility, go into like an operator role or a
Yeah.
maintenance role instead.
Yeah, yeah. Was there anything we left off the table on that one? You had mentioned the maintenance, you had mentioned the water treatment. Was there any other roles that you could end up going towards?
Sure. Another unskilled role also would be taking water samples because we're required to sample all of our systems to make sure there's no lead and copper or plastics or any of that kind of stuff in our water. And so that's proven by taking like quarterly samples, like 4 samples a month. And these samples have to come out of customers' homes. So you can't just like have a dedicated tap that you always sample from. You always got to be moving around the system. So there's people that take those samples and kind of organize and work with customers to get those samples from them. So that's another position you could have is I guess you would call it a sampler. I don't know what you would call that position. Lead and copper. We call them the lead and copper crew because that's what they're basically testing for.
It must be very busy in Detroit.
Oh
The
yeah,
lead,
heck
the lead
yeah.
and
Oh my
copper
God,
crew.
you wouldn't. Yes, man, that is something I definitely thought about was like that's not an environment that I'm used to is like that type of corruption that happens in their municipalities, the the water itself not safe to drink. I haven't dealt with either one of those situations in that extreme situation, so I'm kinda lucky here where I'm at.
Okay, how about your podcast, Sweet Child of Time? I see it on your mic
Yeah.
boom there. What
Oh,
is
yeah?
it? What's it about? Yeah.
Well, when I was reading meters, I used to listen to albums, but then, like, when podcasts became a thing, I started listening to, like, Terry Gross's Fresh Air and started listening to, like, NPR podcasts, and then I found these recap podcasts people started doing where they would watch a TV show and then they would recap the show, discuss the scenes, discuss the actors within the shows, and those were the podcasts that I really started gravitating to. So when I decided to start doing my own podcast, I went that route. So I started doing TV shows and movies that had time as a theme or like a major player in the show itself. So I started out doing the TV show Wheel of Time. Then I started doing 1899, Dark, 100 Years of Solitude, the Time Bandits TV series. I did Welcome to Derry recently, and I'm getting ready to do Little House on the Prairie. That's what my next focus is going to be. So anything that either deals with like time displacement, time travel, or like being in a different era is kind of where I like to focus my attention, I suppose.
Here's the lottery question. Would you still show up for work if you got filthy rich overnight?
Man, yeah, take this job and shove it. Come on. Yes. I would absolutely quit my job. There's like, because I'm a musician and a podcaster. So like if I was filthy rich, then I could spend all my time playing music and podcasting, which it would
There
be
you go.
great. If
Yeah.
I didn't have these hobbies, I might feel differently. But as it is, like work is just a waste of my time. So
I
yeah,
think that, well, I think a lot of people don't have anything outside of their work. Like their work is their identity, right? So
sure,
they're more
sure.
likely to, for this question, say, no, I'm going back to work because that's where I get my fulfillment from. Whereas if you're getting fulfillment outside of it, hey, why not?
I mean, there is a certain amount of pride that I take, especially when I'm able to like do something that nobody else is able to do. If there's like a particularly tough location that only I know the location of, or like when I'm able to help somebody find a line that they haven't been able to find for hours, and then I can help them. There's a lot of pride in that, and like of me knowing the tools to help them. But I don't think that ties in with my identity or my sense of self at all. Where I've always kind of viewed work as work, and I'm here to make money, and that's my sole purpose for being here is to be employed. So I would probably welcome phone calls from my coworkers in a friendly basis, or if even they needed to help find a location every now and then. As a rich guy, I would help them. I'd fly over my copter and I'd, find that line for them. But I would not be working an 8-hour job a day. Heck no, man. How about
Okay.
you? The same question back to you. I need to know this. Would you
No, no, I would definitely
wait,
not go
wait,
back.
which no? Would you
I
would
would
you stay
definitely
your
not go
job?
back to work. They would never, they'd be like, what happened to that guy? And what happened? Hopefully they wouldn't know I won the lottery because your chance of being murdered goes up exponentially when people
That's
know it.
right.
So you gotta filter it through an attorney is how you gotta do it. And then you gotta move.
Well, yeah, you have an interesting job as well. So that, yeah, I guess that says a lot. Even if you have like a job that I find interesting and fascinating, even you want to like say bye if you had enough money. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
interesting.
yeah, it's an interesting job, but at the same time, I've done it. Like, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I could find other things to do, you know.
Gotcha.
Anyway, all right, we're on the speed round. So this is the portion where I read you something, some words that I found on the
Okay.
internet, and then you tell me your opinion about them.
Okay.
You can say love it, hate it, move on. You could do a 10-hour diatribe if you wanted. Whatever comes to mind for whatever I say. All right, you ready?
Okay.
And this is very hit or miss. It has been
Okay.
missed many times. If this does not go well, it is not your fault. I promise you. Okay.
Love that. Okay.
First up is smart meters versus manual reading.
Hate to say it. I'll take the smart meters because they can see your daily usage. And that comes in such handy when a customer's like, I didn't have a leak. I don't know when I use all this water. If you got the smart meter, you can see exactly when they use that water to the day. So that's nice.
How often does that happen? Like some sort of leak at someone's house that causes an insane amount of water usage?
I mean, out of our 30,000, 35,000 customers, 3 a week, something like
Okay.
that. So pretty small
Okay.
average, but consistent. It's very apt to happen. Usually it's almost always a toilet leak. Almost always. The
Where it's just
toilet is
running?
running.
Okay.
The toilet just water just goes right down the tank. So you don't actually see the water. Sometimes you can't actually even hear it, but it's always running through your toilet. So that's the number one cause.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Estimated billing.
Hate it. Get out of here. That's the worst because, like, when you get an estimated bill, you can almost guarantee that when you get the actual read, that it was estimated too high. So then the actual read also gets estimated because it doesn't look right compared to the other estimated read. Get them estimated reads out of here. 100% accuracy. That's what I'm looking for.
All right. Meter tampering.
Oh, meter tampering. Yeah, you think so much less of a customer when they start tampering with their meter. Yeah, that's when your opinion of them goes way down. You're like, you really think this is that important that you want to mess with our equipment to like get a dollar on us? Like, yeah, don't do it. I mean, plus that's instilled in me as like a southerner. Like you just don't mess with stuff like that. It's like somebody else's stuff. You don't mess with it. Straight
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Right. All right.
Low opinion of meter tampering.
Low opinion. Okay. Yellow jackets.
They're the biggest enemy of any meter reader because you know if you kill it and you smush it and it's he releases pheromones, so the other yellow jackets go into attack mode. So you cannot kill a yellow jacket. You can't smush it like that, slap it, because then it releases the pheromone. The other yellow jackets will go into attack mode.
First of all, how many times have you been stung?
Couldn't even tell you.
So it's more than five.
Scores of times. Scores of times.
And have you been chased by multiples, like because of
Yes.
pheromones or what have you?
Yes. That's how I
Wow.
learned that, is that I slapped at a yellow jacket and then, like, they kept following me and they wouldn't stop following me. And I wasn't anywhere near my vehicle, and I just
Mm.
kept getting followed and stung, and they were inside my clothes. And it wasn't until I actually got into my vehicle that's the safest place you can go during a yellow jacket attack is into a vehicle, because that way you're sealed up inside there and no more can get to you. But yeah, buddy. Yellow jackets are the I would rather get attacked by a dog than a yellow jacket.
Jesus. The I have kids plea.
Yeah, me too. I also have kids. That does not work. It doesn't work.
Okay. Pit pumps.
Boy, yeah. That used to be a necessary item when you had to go meter to meter and the meter boxes get full of water because of their ground level. You need to get a pit pump to pump the water out. Oh boy, those things, the further down you get, the less they start working. And usually the meter is at the lowest point in the box. So even if you pump out all of the water, except for maybe like those last few drops are what causes you not to see the meter. So you got to get that thing completely dry. And yeah, it's a clunky tool to carry around because it's like about 4 feet long and it helps you get into those wet boxes, but it ain't no fun. And they always spit back at you. The top of it always spits right back at you as you're pumping. It's unavoidable. They're no fun.
All right. That's the end of the speed round. I don't like the rest of them on the list. They're stupid. All right, man. Good job. Actually, I think we'll keep this one in. That worked all right.
Okay.
All right, this is our last question. Here we go. What is a secret about being a utility worker that most people don't know?
We touched on this earlier too, so I hate to like be repetitive, but you can get access to anywhere. You can get access probably to the White House as long as you have on a utility vest and a white truck with a logo on the side. That's the secret. If you ever want to get into anywhere, that's the way to do it. I hate to say it, it's absolutely true.
All right, man. Steve, thanks for being on Tales from the Shift. I really appreciate it. think we learned a lot about being in the water business.
Well, thank you for having me. I know it's not quite as exciting as some of your other guys that you've had on because I perused your previous episodes, and I was like, "How am I going to fit into this?" But I mean,
Hey,
here we are. I did it, so that's how
yeah,
it's done.
don't worry about it. People have to do all these jobs. We're going to get all the jobs on here eventually, whether they're
That's right,
super fancy or they're ones that require people to go to work and get paid, pay the bills. You
and
know what I
get
mean?
dirty. Yep.
Right on. All right, Steve. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Shane. Take care.